Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan. The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
Stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. We are coming off a dramatic finish to a very full day of testimony. Justice Court was wrapping up. State prosecutors told the judge the defendant, Michelle Troconis, may have displayed text from a sealed custody report on her laptop in the view of the public seated in the gallery and the camera inside the courtroom. Now, the state asserting that no one is supposed to have access to that report, including Michelle Troconis. We'll dig into what happens next coming up. Also on Thursday, an attorney who is the guardian ad litem for the 5 Dulos children took the stand. Guardian ad litem is appointed to represent the best interest of children in court. Attorney Michael Meehan testified about phone calls involving the defendant and Fotis Dulos, in which they talked about the strain the custody battle was having on their relationship. He also spoke about Fotis calling him on May 25th, 2019, to tell him Jennifer was missing.
How did he sound?
He was very excited in the course of the call.
Now, the jury also got to see new surveillance video submitted to police from a neighbor of Fotis Dulos in Farmington, where the Tacoma and a GMC Yukon are seen leaving Fotis Dulos' home the morning that the Tacoma was detailed. More about that later on. First, let's get back to NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geist live outside Stamford Superior Court. Kevin, we're going to start out with that sealed report on display allegedly on Michelle's laptop. That's according to the state. And Kevin, there were some serious implications surrounding that.
Right, Shannon, good morning. There were some pretty big concerns at the end of yesterday. This report was issued not long before Jennifer Dulos disappeared and was never supposed to be brought up in court. It was never supposed to be seen by anyone. And now there are concerns that it may have been seen by members of the public. Here's a shot shown during the live stream that shows the position of Michelle Troconis' laptop relative to the gallery and the camera operator. The operator doing a traditional pan he has many times during this trial to show the courtroom. We have blurred the laptop in the event it does contain content from that sealed report. The state at the end of the day asserting no one is supposed to have access to that report, and that includes the defendant. The state raising the concern to the judge that someone in the gallery may have seen part of that report. The judge ordered the state's attorney's office to find out more about how a person in the gallery of the trial noticed it and how they recognize the report if no one is supposed to have seen it. For context, the gallery is directly behind the defendant and the prosecutors. That's also where the live stream camera is located.
The concern the state has is this notion that she would have access on her device to a report that it starts off that a member of the audience is able to see, which is clearly under seal. So that is concerning. The second major point is that that was displayed for the public with a news camera behind us, and that she shouldn't even have read it to begin with.
And that is where we will start today. The judge will hear exactly what the state was able to find and decide what next steps are necessary, including the possibility of a contempt hearing. Shannon.
All right, and Michelle's attorney, Kevin, adamant that she only has physical copies of just several pages of that report. So again, no word yet on potentially how that could have appeared on Michelle's laptop. Judge Kevin Randolph, very stern when ending court for the day and bringing up the issue of possible contempt. And Kevin, the state alleges this was not the first time something has been shown on Michelle Troconis' laptop. Talk about that part.
Right, so they raised a few other examples that they apparently raised to the court privately, one being an instance where a Stanford Advocate reporter was able to see from the gallery on Michelle Troconis' laptop during forensics testimony, where she had an article from the Associated Press up about a forensics expert from the state of Connecticut that fabricated DNA evidence. They also brought up an instance where they or someone related to the state's case noticed someone involved with Michelle Troconis may have been mouthing something to jurors at one point during the trial. So they made a few allegations at the end of yesterday, and we still don't know exactly what the judge will make of all of these allegations.
All right, Kevin, back to that custody evaluation. It came up earlier in the day during the guardian ad litem testimony from Michael Meehan. Defense attorney Audrey Felson's cross-examination focused heavily on that report, which again is sealed by court order. She was not allowed to ask about anything about the contents of the evaluation. Her questions were met with objections from prosecutor Michelle Manning.
One of the factors that is addressed in custody reports is a parent's psychological status.
That is one of the factors under our custody statute.
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
These questions are running over the double yellow line. Sustained.
Who was appointed as an evaluator?
Objection.
Sustained.
Was it a psychiatrist who was appointed?
Sustained.
Did both parties agree on who was going to conduct the evaluation?
Objection.
Well, did both parties agree? That's overruled.
Yes.
Did the court accept that individual to participate in the evaluation, to conduct the evaluation?
Objection.
Sustained.
How long did it take for this custody report to be prepared?
Objection.
So the jury is not allowed to hear who asked for the custody report and psychological evaluation. But according to this court document I obtained, Jennifer Dulos made a request for a psychological evaluation of Fotis Dulos filed in 2017. Also in this document, we learned both Jennifer and Fotis agreed to have Dr. Stephen Herman perform the comprehensive custody and psychological evaluation. The results of the actual evaluation, again, remain sealed under court order. And as we have already heard in court, the jury will not hear about the conclusions of the evaluation either. Kevin, on Wednesday, Judge Randolph said the court doesn't want to be walking on a razor's edge during cross-examination of Attorney Meehan, but that's a good analogy for exactly kind of where things went yesterday.
Absolutely. You sort of watched in that soundbite right there, sort of the judge really pulling the reins back on the defense per prosecutors asking him to with multiple objections. This was something that we continued to see throughout testimony yesterday. The defense, of course, saying that parts of that custody report are sort of at the heart of their defense, saying that Fotis Dulos had a favorable report, so he would have no motive to kill Jennifer Dulos. So this is sort of where the court has to sort of walk that fine line. And we did see the judge really pull the reins at the end of yesterday, sort of really keeping the defense in a tight line with exactly what they could ask about. Meanwhile, state prosecutors were sort of asking a lot of peripheral questions about that report itself. So other than this, I don't expect much testimony about this report at all, other than what we are expected to hear this morning about the report and what Michelle Troconis may have had access to, but that'll all be outside the presence of the jury. Shannon.
All right. Kevin, let's get back to that testimony from Attorney Meehan. A lot of new information to unpack. He testified that Dulos and the defendant were both very down on a conversation that they had had about the impact, about the ongoing court battle and the impact it was having on them. And when it comes to Fotis Dulos, that evolved into a combination of emotions when a custody report was completed, again, the month before Jennifer disappeared. According to Meehan, on one hand, Fotis was encouraged. On the other hand, he was upset and outraged, he said. I'll fast forward to May 25th, the day after Jennifer Dulos disappeared. Meehan read his notes from that day to the jury, detailing a phone call that he had from Fotis Dulos.
He stated to me, "Mike, have you heard the news?" I replied, "No." He then stated, "Jennifer is missing." I noticed the tone in his voice to not be down or somber, but to be more excited. I don't know what to attribute the tone to his voice to. I asked, "When did she go missing?" And he indicated sometime yesterday, 5/24/19. I asked him where he was yesterday and whether he had an alibi. He said he was home in Farmington all morning, then in meetings. He mentioned he had cameras in his house. He immediately asked about the children and wanted me to address their safety.
Kevin, this had to be a surprising phone call for Attorney Meehan. Here's what he said about what quickly happened in the aftermath of that call.
I ended the call with him and began getting phone calls from Attorney Midler, New Canaan PD, and Jacob Petranker. I spoke with New Canaan PD, and they informed me of the investigation involving Connecticut State Police Major Crime Squad. They informed me that Jennifer's home in New Canaan was a major crime scene. The police asked for permission to interview the children, and I authorized the police to speak with them.
What's your initial?
Now, Meehan mentioning the divorce attorneys in this case, Jennifer's attorney, Ruben Midler, who I sat down with back in 2021, and then Fotis Dulos' attorney, Jacob Pietranker, who investigators believe asked his client to write a timeline for what he did during the day that Jennifer went missing. Now, a striking moment of Meehan's testimony was when he was asked about Jennifer.
Sir, as part of your responsibilities as guardian ad litem between 2017 and 2019, did you speak often with Jennifer Farber-Dulos?
I did.
And after May 24, 2019, have you heard or seen Jennifer Farber-Dulos since then?
Sadly, I've never spoken to her again.
So, Kevin, this insight, chilling here that Fotis Dulos sounded excited, according to attorney Meehan, when he told him that Jennifer was missing. Meehan even asking him about any sort of an alibi that Fotis Dulos may have had, right?
Right. That was sort of one of the main points that came up multiple times, was sort of asking him if he had an alibi. The defense attorney even trying to see if Meehan instructed Fotis Dulos to write down any sort of an alibi. And Meehan sort of continued to assert over and over again. This was a question that came up multiple times, that he gave no instructions to Fotis Dulos following that phone call right after Jennifer Dulos disappeared. So we continued to hear a lot of testimony from Meehan about sort of those days right after. And it wasn't the only testimony we heard yesterday about some of the behaviors that Fotis Dulos was exhibiting in the days following Jennifer Dulos' disappearance.
Attorney Meehan, Kevin, also detailed a phone call he had with Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis back in March of 2019.
Did you call Fotis Dulos that day? Or?
He called me.
And what did he say?
Generally speaking, he called to talk about the court's decision that had just granted his motion for supervised visitation, but it placed the restrictions on his parenting time so that Ms. Troconis and her daughter couldn't be present. And generally speaking, he was upset about that. He indicated that he was concerned that the continued litigation would have an adverse impact on his relationship with Ms. Troconis.
And what did you say in response?
I indicated to him, really just in summary, that the court had issued a decision which created a pathway forward for Ms. Troconis and her daughter to be able to work with me, with both parties, in an effort to try to provide access to them in a future date, but that I wasn't his lawyer and I couldn't advocate for him and deal with issues within the context of the litigation.
So under that court order, Michelle Troconis and her daughter would have to leave for Jefferson Crossing whenever the Dulos children would come to visit the home. Attorney Meehan says Fotis then handed the phone to Michelle to talk with them. He testified that she had asked him what she had done to cause the court to rule that way.
What did she sound like on the phone?
She was down as well. She was frustrated. She had expressed disappointment and really just a lack of understanding as to why the court had not allowed access between her and the children.
Well, as you heard Attorney Meehan testify, he told Fotis about a path forward for Michelle and her daughter to eventually have access, and he talked about that pathway with Michelle as well.
I asked her even if she had ever met or spoke with Jennifer Dulos. She indicated that she hadn't, but would be open to speaking with her or meeting her for coffee to discuss being reintroduced to the children. Michelle indicated that she didn't move here for all this and that she felt badly for the children and Nicole. She believes that they have all been the victim of this litigation. She is also divorced and she doesn't act this way with Nicole's father. Her tone was calm but very down. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes with her. The conversation ended after that.
Now, Attorney Meehan reading from notes that he took after that phone call on March 21st of 2019. Kevin, let's talk about why it was so important for the prosecution to call Meehan and get his perspective about how the relationship was going.
Right. So we've heard from the defense attorneys that at the heart of their defense case is that there was no motive for Fotis Dulos to hurt Jennifer Dulos at all, because the custody dispute was actually going well and in Fotis Dulos' favor. We hear that from Michelle Troconis, and we've heard that from some prior testimony as well. So this was the state's chance to sort of rub up against the defense's assertion. This was their chance to bring in a witness who could sort of dispel some of that and say, actually, it wasn't going as well as Fotis Dulos was letting on, even to Michelle Troconis herself. It wasn't going as well as he thought, and so ultimately there could have been a motive. It's to cast doubt on the jury against sort of what the defense is asserting and what they'll likely bring up when it's their turn to present a case.
Attorney Mia and Kevin also spoke about what Fotis Dulos told him would be an ideal situation in his mind. That conversation happened back in 2017, early on in the divorce and the custody proceedings.
Well, when I met with Mr. Dulos, he had expressed his preferences and what he wanted to see happen at the conclusion of the case, which is ultimately, it was his goal to have everyone live in the house together, that being Ms. Dulos, along with the children, along with Ms. Troconis and her daughter as well.
He indicated he wished Jennifer, Michelle, and all the children reside at Fort Jefferson Crossing?
Correct.
Now, it's unclear what Jennifer or Michelle might have thought about Fotis's idea, but later on in the process, it appears Troconis had had enough in all this. When asked by Attorney Felsen if he knew about Michelle's plans to move out of state, Meehan said he learned she was looking to move away from all of this, meaning the ongoing litigation. Felsen also asked Meehan about Dulos's character.
You had many conversations with him throughout the course of your representation of the children.
Correct.
Was it your opinion that Mr. Dulos lied an awful lot?
Yes.
So, Kevin, from a defense standpoint, why is it so critical to enforce that to the jury that Fotis Dulos lied often?
Right, so this sort of interaction in question sort of played directly into the defense's hand. So they're trying to sort of display to the jury that Michelle Troconis wanted out of this relationship. She wanted out of the state. She didn't want anything to do with this custody dispute anymore. So she ultimately wouldn't have been involved at all in Fotis Dulos' planning of any sort of alleged murder or any sort of plot. And then ultimately there's also the point to be made about her wanting to be away from sort of the whole process, as well as him lying a lot. So everything that Michelle Troconis relayed to investigators could have been only information that Fotis fed to her and nothing more.
Well, Michelle Troconis' parents addressed the media outside of court yesterday. Her mother saying it's been a very long trial and it's mostly been about Fotis Dulos and not her daughter, Michelle Troconis.
Of course, she's innocent. She doesn't have anything to do with Jennifer's disappearance. Okay, and we're here to support her, and we hope, it will end up soon, soon, because it has been a tragedy for us, and I'm sure it's a tragedy for the Farmer family too. But we want this to end and to my daughter to be okay again and to regain our life.
Kevin, you spoke with the family on lunch break as well. This was hours before that issue of the alleged report showing up on Michelle Troconis' laptop and the judge mentioning the word contempt. Gotta wonder now what's on her parents' minds. They have remained steadfast in their support for their daughter and maintaining her innocence. What do you think is on their minds as they head into court today?
Right, I'm sure it'll be on their mind to maybe even speak again today, possibly at the lunch break, just to sort of, clear the air about any of the allegations that the state made at the end of the day. Of course, there definitely will be concerned regarding any sort of the proceedings going forward. But of course, as we've seen historically, they'll continue to back Michelle Troconis throughout this entire process. Shannon.
And sitting directly behind her the entire time throughout this trial, showing that support just feet away from her. Kevin, guys, live once again for us outside Stanford Superior Court. We'll let you get back inside. And we want to clarify something we first talked about in yesterday's show. We heard testimony from the manager at Russell Speeder's Car Wash in Avon about the day Fotis Dulos took to Tacoma to get it detailed. We pointed out that the manager testified that the cashier fills out a log sheet for each customer, which includes a name, phone number, and the type of car, timing, and pricing. According to the arrest warrant for Michelle Troconis, the phone number left was Michelle's cell phone number. The vehicle was described as a Toyota Sienna, and the name field was left blank. Outside of court yesterday, Schoenhorn emphasized it was not Fotis Dulos who filled out the log. It was the employee at the car wash. So that wrong model of the vehicle appears to be their mistake and not something that Fotis Dulos wrote intentionally. All right, much more to come on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Coming up, we will talk about Fotis Dulos' next-door neighbor on Jefferson Crossing, what he had to tell the jury about surveillance video from his house, and what he says he saw Fotis do the day after Jennifer disappeared. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Back with us again to talk about the case is Brian Foley, who was the spokesperson for the state police commissioner at the time Jennifer Dulos disappeared, also a former Hartford homicide detective. Brian, thanks for being back with us again.
Thanks.
Some important testimony that we've seen this week. Let's first talk about how we started things off yesterday, hearing about Fotis's neighbor on Jefferson Crossing. Garrison Hudkins actually bought to Jefferson Crossing from Fotis and Jennifer Dulos back in 2010, before Jefferson Crossing was even built. So he had known Fotis for some time. Listen to what he says here happened on May 25th, the morning after Jennifer went missing.
He had a shaved head, and I did not recognize him initially. He was riding a one-wheel scooter past my home up towards Eli Road. And that was unusual to see someone doing that, especially towards Eli Road. But more importantly, I didn't recognize who it was. It is a private road, as I mentioned. So I didn't know who it was.
Around what time of day was this?
About 8:45 in the morning.
Did you speak to him?
He did approach me, and that's when I recognized his voice and recognized it was Fotis.
What did he say to you?
Well, at first I said to Fotis, how are you? And his response to me was, Jennifer's missing, right?
And what did you say?
I said to him, yes, I'd heard that. I hope she's okay, but I have not heard about the children. I hope they're okay.
What was his response?
His response was, he asked me how long we retained our security video, and to make sure it didn't get deleted because he needed to prove that he was there on Friday.
So immediately, Fotis Dulos asking his neighbor about his home security cameras. The jury also saw surveillance video from the neighbor's house where the Toyota Tacoma and a GMC Yukon are seen leaving Fotis Dulos' home the morning the Tacoma was detailed. Now, investigators say Dulos was in the Tacoma and that they believe Troconis was driving the Yukon. So, Brian, let's talk about this behavior that we're seeing from Fotis Dulos the morning after Jennifer Dulos has disappeared. He's riding around on a scooter in his neighborhood. He's sounding excited on the phone to the guardian ad litem, who's responsible for the safety of his kids and when it comes to the court, saying that he's almost sounded excited to tell him that Jennifer was missing. What's the jury supposed to make of all this?
So I think what the prosecution wants to see, or wants the jury to take out of all this, is that they're starting to see anomalies in patterns of life, differences from normative behavior that a person would normally have. Look, this is all circumstantial evidence, but it's really starting to point to the fact that Fotis is talking to everybody around him, his neighbors who he doesn't ever talk to. So the jury might start to think, clearly he's talked to Michelle Troconis about this. So the more people that he's talked to about it, it's starting to make it look like a normal person would talk to their significant other about this sort of thing.
And we know that state police had come to that Jefferson Crossing house the night before to inform him, again, that Jennifer was missing. Also, the video of the Tacoma and the Yukon, what's the significance of that? And I also, too, I just want to say, this neighbor really seemed to take pause when the first reaction was, how about your cameras? So what's the significance, though, when he sees this video and it comes to the defendant, Michelle Troconis? He's talking about, I didn't really see these cars usually.
Again, it's showing a separation from normal behavior to now abnormal behavior. It's a small little street. They know in a small little neighborhood like that, everything that goes on there. And now you start to see things that are starting to really look odd and very different. And he's taking notice of it. And also it's tying in you know, these cars are moving around. There's cars moving all throughout this, and Michelle's involved in all of it, or appears to be involved in all of it. And that is, again, it's painting a picture. She had to have known something. And what they're trying to establish is, and again, for the tampering evidence, that she knew there was a crime.
And that's eventually what led to those second arrests for Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis. And in fact, investigators hadn't even asked this neighbor for the video from that day. It's when he went back and started kind of looking at things again and thought, I might send this forward as well, which again, state police got so many tips.
It's a good citizen right there,
on this case. If it seemed suspicious, people were calling in a lot of these tips, which state police vetted every single one of them. Let's talk now about the car wash. We heard extensive testimony from the general manager of Russell Speeder's Car Wash in Avon. We saw the video, again, from the day that the Tacoma was brought in to be detailed. Why is the detailing, Brian, of the Tacoma so important, specifically when it comes to Michelle Troconis?
Well, first of all, homicide detectives hate car washes. So much evidence to homicides are lost in car washes. So, but they're also a sign of, if your car is involved in something like this, that's where they end up getting detailed. Now there's shenanigans at the car wash. The Fotis gives Michelle Troconis' number to the place. That's who you're going to call after it's ready. They give the wrong, or they have the wrong model car on there. You know, these are all things that are starting to look like clearly shenanigans are happening here. But really, what I think it ties into is if he gave them her number, at some point he would have had to tell her, hey, the car wash is going to call you when the car is ready. Again, tying her into knowledge of what is happening. Now, the charge is tampering with evidence. So to get that charge, the person needs to have known a crime was committed, and what they're doing is affecting that evidence or tampering with that evidence. So they're really starting to tie in that she had to have known a crime was committed, and now that her actions obviously bring it to a car wash are tampering with that evidence.
And what I still want to hear more of is what potentially Fotis Dulos told her that morning about going to the car wash. What was the intention
Don't we all?
There? Also on Thursday, we heard testimony from a special agent with the FBI. This is Kevin Hoyland, who traveled from New Hampshire to testify about cell phone calls and message records seized from AT&T. Those records confirm what the jury has already learned in testimony throughout the trial, including Michelle Troconis traveling with Fotis Dulos to Albany Avenue in Hartford the night that Jennifer Dulos disappeared. Her travels to Russell Speeder's Car Wash in Avon with Fotis Dulos also captured on those records as well, where he had Pavel Gumeni's truck detailed. Brian, the cell phone data here from a new warrant issued late last year. The judge actually threw out earlier evidence from Michelle's cell phone because police, they say, took it without a warrant. Can you talk about this warrant process, when it happens, if there is any sort of a misstep, how you kind of reroute and go about seizing that evidence in the court's mind that is a justified seizure?
So as a homicide detective, you start to get evidence, and cell phones are great evidence. You know, entering a home is a great evidence. You know, searching somebody's belongings, searching their cell phone. Most of the time, you want to get a search warrant from the court, or and you kind of work it out with the prosecutor. You call them and say, hey, we have this cell phone. We're going to search it. There's such a thing called an ex parte warrant. You know, you could have it stripped without any of that. There's a lot of things that you can do with that cell phone. So that evidence was likely thrown out, and then they make him actually apply for a search warrant. That's fill out the warrant, bring it to a prosecutor. He approves it, that there's probable cause that a crime was committed, and there's evidence in that's the item that's going to be searched, and then a judge actually signs it. So this is the second step. All right, we probably shouldn't have done it this way the first time. Now we have a search warrant the second time, and now it's entered in. Nothing changed in that cell phone when it was seized in custody.
And interesting to John Schoenhorn's point, he's like, this has already been done. Why are we bringing it up again? He tried to get this information suppressed, but it did confirm what we had already seen in the video surveillance. And at that point, that to investigators probably meant more seeing the video than the cell phone records might have indicated.
Video evidence is always the best evidence.
And to your knowledge, there wasn't anything on a text or a messaging or anything like that from the phone that stood out to investigators?
You know, I don't think there was a smoking gun in there. You know, that's what they're looking for, the magic evidence in there. I don't think they didn't find anything like that.
Another big moment was when the judge decided not to allow that testimony from the chief medical examiner about Jennifer's death. Judge Randolph saying that the jury has already seen more than enough evidence than even Dr. James Gill did when he made his determination that her death was a homicide. What are your thoughts on that decision, and does it have much of an impact on all of this?
So this is interesting. You know, I remember these actual conversations happening during this case, and so the defense wants to create this belief that maybe Jennifer's still alive, she's still out there, maybe she's a missing person. And so what the prosecution wanted the medical examiner to say is no way is she still alive, that she would have to be deceased on this. Look, when this case first happens, they get DNA from the victim's toothbrush and a hairbrush. You get what you can. You submit those into all missing person databases everywhere. You start to find blood evidence. You go to every hospital across the country, and you start looking for any sort of people that had come in there that would match these types of injuries here. Moreover, in certain rare cases, a medical examiner can pronounce death with blood or non-survivable injuries. If the blood is a certain type of oxygen levels, they can tell it's a deep arterial bleed, non-survivable wounds, that sort of thing. They can say those types of things. I don't think they had that here in this case, and so that's why they weren't allowed to come in there. But really what the prosecution wants to do is eliminate the possibility of this still being a missing persons case, and the opposite for the defense. They want to continue being that. The medical examiner, again, would have been just regurgitating old evidence.
Jennifer Dulos' family releasing a statement the day that the bloody T-shirt and bra were held up, saying that they had hoped that that evidence would dispute that idea that she disappeared on her own. Brian, thank you so much for your perspective. Again, such a unique case, again, here in the state of Connecticut. No body still found in all of this.
Tragic, yep.
All right, we will have you back on again, and that wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis streaming special. You can watch the trial live on our streaming channels when court starts around 10 a.m. We'll have live coverage on NBC Connecticut starting with the news at 4. Be sure to join us weekdays at 9 a.m. for more in-depth analysis as the trial continues to unfold.